Hi, hey, hello. If you're new here, my name is Rain. If you're not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you stopping on by to my little corner of the internet. And in today's video, I am both simultaneously getting in the mood for spooky season, spooky art, prepping for Drawtober, kind of mentally, not necessarily on page today, and also kind of experimenting with paint pens again to try and figure out how I want to approach another step in my disability art series. So if you're interested in watching that and if you want to draw along with me, please stick around to the end of the video. And if you want to share what you get up to whilst we go on this little creative journey together, I would love to hear about it in the comments or in DMs on one of the social medias linked down below. Other than that, let's just get started because this is such a interesting topic for me, and also contortionist and spooky smoke. It just is. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I'm just really excited to share it. So let's get into it. So I've kind of noticed that I have a tendency to always go in with a skin tone first when I'm working with paint pens, and I went out of my way when I was like working on this piece to only do the gray, the tones basically in the background, right? So when it came to the sketching process, I was just kind of spitting out the idea, getting it on paper so that I can kind of think about it more thoroughly later. I just sketched out the gray and the general shape of the body before going in with the skin tone, and I am not into it. When I do painting with paint out of a tube, which I next to never do, I always go in with a toned color first so that I can kind of build based on the undertone that I want. And so usually I try to go for a more peachy color or something that has a little bit more red to it. Sometimes I'll do a blue just because I want the person to look a little more lifeless, I guess you could say. And so my first issue is that I think in the future when I approach paint pens, I need to think about it more like classic painting, at least for me, and think about how I would want the base tones to look before I actually go into more skin colored hues and then go from dark to light. I think that doing the kind of light to dark approach is dark to light to dark approach is preventing me from really carving out the shapes of the face and the body the way that I want to, and achieving a more desirable and kind of immersive experience. I don't know if that's the way to articulate it, because I don't follow necessarily the laws of how humans naturally look skin color wise. I know it looks very normal right now for people who've been here a minute. They know what I'm getting into, but with how I kind of approach rendering and conceptualizing skin and tones, and the way I approach kind of creating more diversity to the color in the end, you can see and figure out what the skin tone is supposed to be. However, it generally ends up being kind of implied by a range of other colors around it, like deep purples that are totally unnatural as a shadow color. Not purple itself, but like the tone of purple I use, the intensity, the vibrancy of the color. The blues, the yellows, all of that kind of come together to make it so that you know that it's supposed to be skin, but it's not quite how you expect skin to look, I guess is the best way to articulate it. And I feel like I could just be doing so much better of a job of creating that feeling, creating that sensation that I like to have with my art and all of that if I just start with an unnatural color and build from there. Like even just a lighter blue and then build the skin tones on top of it. especially because part of why I wanted to use the Arctic's paint pens over the Ohuhu Gray, not Ohuhu Gray, Posca Gray, is because I find that the Posca paint pens are a little bit more opaque right out the tube, the barrel, than the acrylics. I think it might partially be that brush marker tip to it, but when I'm actually kind of laying down the pen, I notice I have to do less layers over a certain color most of the time with the Poscas to get the color I want or the opacity I want than the Arctic's ones. And so my goal was to see just how many layers I would need to kind of completely get rid of that undertone so that I can see how effective these acrylics would be to kind of create a wisp is not the word, a kind of soft mist, a smoke to it, you know, not something completely opaque, not like a fog necessarily, but something where you can see the colors through it, and I don't have to go through the process of either kind of layering a lighter color over to create the indication of something being see-through. I was kind of just hoping that doing it this way, I don't have to put in that work because you can just see through the paint pen. And we'll discuss my conclusions about that effectiveness and the opacity of these when we get there, and there's a visual example on screen where I can kind of explain my thoughts and if I think it'll actually work the way I want it to in the future for future drawings. But I think overall, if I lay down that undertone knowing that there is a bit less of a opaqueness than I tell myself there is, like I tell myself, oh, these are acrylics, they're opaque, there's no need to layer for a full kind of perfect solid mass, I guess would be the way of saying it. But I tell myself that, and I don't really prove myself wrong because I layer so much just naturally with the way I draw that it ends up looking that way in the end. And I don't really actually notice that middle step where it's a little less desirable. And that might just be because I get into such a zone when I'm drawing that I have a really hard time actually remembering what I'm trying to experiment with and what conclusions I'm trying to not reach, but what I'm trying to make a conclusion for, right? And so I definitely got somewhere with this, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes in the future because I really do want to do more kind of fantasy illustrations. Not fantasy, I guess would be the right way to say it, but more fantastical illustrations. I want to have more magical elements and more of a magical feel to my art in the future. I love my character designs as just flat character designs, but I've talked about it a few times on my channel where one of my favorite illustrations that I've ever done is my drawing of Eris for the Mothbitten Library prompt from Drawtober last year. And while the scene is very simple for me, it's not something that's like so complex that it's like a magnum opus for me, you know. It's not like it's not like I spent so much time on it and that's why I love it, right? Rather, the reason I love it is because it feels so complete and it feels so her as a character, right? And I want to create more work that feels like that. I want to create more work that feels immersive to the experience for the character. I want people to be able to look at it and not just see the character, but see the actions they're taking and be able to construct their own narrative about why the situation might be occurring. And that's something I really want to do. And most of my characters being Greek gods, Norse gods, undead zombies, crazy scientists that have made themselves immortal, and zombie plant people. Magic is kind of innate to this world, I think, right? It's a situation where I'm pretty convinced that if there isn't magic, something's wrong, right? It just makes sense that there are magical elements, and to a degree, I kind of consider my OC Eris to be kind of a witch in her own sense. She had some components of some magical upbringing, and that's why the Greek goddess Eris took over her body of all bodies that could be chosen from, right? They were the perfect vessel, both within magic and chaos and kind of moral neutrality, if not questionable morality, for the Greek god of chaos to take over that body and for them to become one with each other and kind of have that established relationship, right? I think that it makes sense for Eris as a character to have been somebody who wouldn't have needed to struggle as much for their own autonomy within the body, right? I don't think Eris experiences the internal struggle of, but that goes against my morals with the Greek goddess of chaos inside of them, right? That just isn't what I want for them as a character. I want their morals to be already questionable enough that the bad decisions that Eris makes to not be completely excusable by the god and a lack of self-control. I think that they as a character are already not quite... I don't want to say they're a bad person. I think they're a good person who makes terrible decisions, and they don't have the social understanding to know that their decisions are completely off-kilter, wild, terrible ideas, right? And so I just feel like magic is so innate to the concept, to the experience, it only makes sense. And I want to start figuring out how I want to illustrate that, render it, and really incorporate it into a world in a way that makes sense for my art style and doesn't feel too out of place. So that's why I kind of approached this overall drawing with that kind of that idea in mind, but also with the knowledge that this is going to be a bit intense, a bit of an experiment, and that I wanted to kind of push my understanding of kind of fluidity, motion, and how I want to approach this idea on a conceptual level and a visual level. While this isn't even what I'm planning to use this knowledge for. So, generally, I'm doing this for a future illustration, but I'm applying it to something completely different. And that's where we come into kind of the disability component to it. I've been wanting to return to my drawings and my thoughts on kind of the way that chronic illnesses consume the body and to an extent can strip you of your autonomy. I want to return to these concepts because I'm going through a very rough point with my health and my body currently, and I want to create pieces that articulate the way I'm feeling internally because my illness is internal, I guess. I want to project that out. And when it comes to feeling and conceptualizing a chronic illness, for me, on a visible level, to create something that represents an abstract concept, which is internal, chronic, lifelong pain, it's very difficult to think of what communicates that to other people, right? And because of that, I'm trying to find something that isn't too out there, but still has a level of unnerving to it. I don't think there's a way to make chronic illness pretty or sexy or attractive, and I don't really agree with the idea of trying to make it pretty, sexy, or attractive. So I want it to feel unsettling. I want it to create discomfort to a viewer in some capacity. And that's why I'm kind of approaching a abnormal pose in this illustration. I'm trying to get a grasp on kind of contorting the body, and what better way to do it than with a contortionist, right? But I'm hoping overall to kind of get a better idea on how to create something that just feels so not right that people can't extrapolate a kind of, well, they can't extrapolate conveniently a level of sexual appeal to it, if that makes sense. Because no matter what, when you present nudity in art, somebody's going to be able to create that element to it or justify that element to it to themselves, which is fine. Like, that's not something that I particularly am worried about. I only draw adult characters. I never draw underage characters, and thus I'm not particularly concerned on that front. People are going to do what they're going to do, and because I create work that I know is purely adult in terms of who they are, I'm not worried about that. I tried to draw Anya Forger one time, realized I don't understand what children look like, and said, well, I'm just never gonna draw cute Spy Family fan art, and moved on with my life, right? So all my characters are adults. None of my disability work would be of somebody who isn't 18, and while I don't really like the idea of people sexualizing chronic illnesses, and is something that I'm personally very adverse to, it's something that I know that I can't avoid, and I can't purely tell people, no, just don't do it. So, I'm trying to really think of ways to make and deconstruct some of these art history ideas of feminine submission and chronic illness as a sign of feminine appeal, disability as a sign of feminine appeal, because kind of historically, when you look at like tuberculosis and conditions like that consumed the body, they literally wasted you away. There was an appeal to the idea that these people were literally deteriorating, and they were becoming a pinnacle of feminine submission and docility. They were too weak and vulnerable, and they needed people to take care of them. And it's a twisted concept, you know, the cult of the invalid, the sexualization of dead bodies, and all of that. But I know it can't be avoided, so I want to say no to it in a way where you have to reach to find that appeal for yourself within my work, right? That's something I really want to work on doing. While I do want to create pieces that show the serenity of accepting a chronic illness, the serenity of kind of saying that this is fine, this is my life, I'm still human, I'm still perfectly fine the way I am, I deserve everything everyone else has, I'm entitled to a normal life, all of those things. While I want to discuss the serenity of that in my work from time to time, it's hard to find a way to approach that serenity in a way where I feel like I'm not adding to this theme that I'm not particularly fond of. And I don't really, wow, I'm really stuttering today. I don't really want to let people who have those kind of mindsets kind of put a dampen on how I creatively express myself. Equally so, I do want to be mindful of it, because I don't really want to kind of continue the theme if I can avoid it. And I think maybe it is a bit different when you are an artist with a chronic illness or a disability drawing something representative of that, and when you're somebody who is drawing someone you don't know who has an illness and is creating it for that type of content and that audience, as many artists were doing when tuberculosis was hot. Ew. Sorry. If you have tuberculosis, I'm sorry, but I'm not attracted to it. Like those Victorian people where Edgar Allan Poe really thought tuberculosis was, he was down bad for it, okay? It's like I can't handle it. Worst part of art history classes is when we get to the part where Edgar Allan Poe was like, oh yeah, by the way, I would love to die of tuberculosis. It's so hot. And I'm like, no, please stop. But it's me trying to be conscious of a historical theme that people probably don't even care about today, right? Which probably is my own problem and something I really need to just stop worrying about and thinking about. But it's also kind of a personal challenge for myself, you know, by not just constricting myself to what first comes to mind, which is the serene acceptance of a physical illness, by pushing myself to approach something like this, which currently I'm titling Lest I Dissolve, L-E-S-T, I Dissolve. We'll see where it ends up in the future, since this is just a sketch, not a finished piece, but I like the concept and I kind of want to do it again in the future. It's the bending over backwards to try and survive and function and accommodate your body whilst all it is doing is kind of giving up on you, wasting away, and consuming you, right? That's kind of where I'm trying to go with it. I literally could never do something like this with my body. I can hardly bend over forward because I'm in so much pain, right? Like, moving hurts. But to an extent, when you try and, like, conceptualize the pain, it kind of feels like you have been forcefully snapped in half backwards, right? My vertebrae are on fire. They're burning. It feels like they are being threaded together with fiery pins and needles and, like, I don't know, smashed together with butter and lard. I don't even know how to articulate it. My back feels so stiff. It feels like feeling bloated, where it just feels wrong and it hurts and you're uncomfortable and it feels like pressure is going to break you, but it's burning at the same time. And so I'm hoping to kind of be able to explore poses and compositions that kind of more effectively articulate these ideas and can communicate the physical feeling to people visually, even if they don't want to read my artist statement, right? Because for all of my previous pieces about chronic illness and mental illnesses, a large part of the piece is the artist statement. The essay I wrote to articulate why I made this piece and what inspired it and what I'm trying to communicate, right? You can probably gather from my piece OCD a little bit about the compulsions and the consumptive feeling that you need to perform what OCD is telling you to do. The voice in the back of your head that is telling you if you don't do it, the world is going to burn. And I have videos on my channel about OCD, desolate consumption, and holy damage. They're old. I'm probably even more poorly articulated then than I am now. And I don't really know if I even communicated my thoughts as effectively then as I can now, right? Because those are pieces that I've made almost a year ago at this point. Some of them I have made over a year ago. And I've settled with these ideas and I've grown an entire year as an artist on how I like to think and conceptualize information and present it, right? So I'm not sure how well I communicated that piece in OCD, and I believe I have a content warning on it for blood and self-harm in regards to OCD, and that's why I'm not going particularly in depth here. Desolate consumption is about the way that you kind of have to present to people that you're fine and you're functional whilst you feel like your body is fading away. How you kind of just have to let your illness consume you on your own, because nobody really wants to hear about your condition over and over and over again, which is something I'm actually really scared of on my channel and communicating here today and stuff like that. I feel like my chronic illness comes up a lot because I really like to make art that vents and verbalizes and illustrates those experiences and how it makes me feel, because it's the primary feeling that I have, you know? When artists make art because they're happy, they're overjoyed, they're having a wonderful experience, when artists are making art based on their emotions, which I personally believe a lot of artists do, a lot of illustration comes from you as an individual. You are your art, and your art is you in a sense. That's part of why I'm not scared of AI art at all, because AI art has none of that soul and none of that kind of creative capacity. Like, the text that you put into a text box are never going to actually articulate, when translated to a visual depiction, the soul that an artist who draws it would. The same way that people who are using ChatGPT and things to create AI image generation are not writers, right? And so I don't believe that the words they put in will ever have the soul of a writer, and thus could never have the soul of an artist, right? Because writing is an art in itself, while a very different form of art than visual illustration, like I do. I can't write, but writers, they build entire universes with words, and people who are using ChatGPT don't have that creative soul, that creative desire and drive that real artists do, and so thus it just doesn't work, right? So with that being said, I'm not scared of AI art because I don't believe that, well, I don't even think it's art, it's AI image generation, but I don't think it can ever compare to what it's like to feel. And nothing created by AI is ever going to make you feel something the way that something created by an artist who is trying to express something deeper through their own hand would ever create, right? And I can explain that more effectively another time, but this isn't a video about AI. I don't think I have any videos that are exclusively about AI, actually. But yeah, I'm not worried about it. I don't really care about it. I think it's just stupid. AI can be so beneficial in so many other departments of the world and capacities, and yet we're over here dealing with AI image bros who think that they're super cool, and it's like, you're so cringy. Can you please just go into a field where AI actually is beneficial and actually can do something good? Just go do something with Grammarly. You know, like, Grammarly's AI, like, spelling suggestions are great, okay? I really appreciate the AI that's been around for 20 years, that's been making it so that Word documents are spelled not super ugly, right? I appreciate that AI. It's doing wonders for college essays since before I could even write, right? That type of stuff I'm like, AI is great for that capacity. I'm getting off topic about something completely irrelevant, and that while I'm confident a lot of my audience cares about my opinion on AI image generation, not really relevant to the discussion of chronic illness, and particularly where I'm trying to go with this art piece. So, what I think I was trying to articulate earlier is that I truly want to find a way to create art that is illustrative of a feeling beyond the words that I attach to it, right? My piece, Holy Damage, is about the trauma and the delegitimization and the verbal harassment and humiliation that I experienced from people of certain religions in my area, assigning my disability something holy. And it's hard to explain outside of the experience, but when you're surrounded by people of a religion, any religion, it doesn't matter. No religion is all bad. No religion is all good, to my knowledge. I'm atheist or agnostic. I know nothing about religion. I'm not interested in it personally. But when people of a religion are telling you that your disability is a gift from God and that this is his way of showing his love and building you up so that you can be strong when you meet him in the afterlife, you lose the ability to consent to treatment, and you lose the ability to have autonomy in your treatment, especially when you're a child. And you're relying on people who are telling you that you shouldn't be too upset about it because of God, rather than you shouldn't be too upset about it because you're still human and you're still worthy, right? It hurts when you're a kid and the comfort that you're offered for realizing that you're abnormal and broken compared to the standard. The words that people say when you realize that you're never gonna be like other kids, you're never gonna have the same life fulfillment as them, are important. The words that are said in that moment, especially if you're an adult talking to a kid with a chronic illness, are important because they're so impressionable and they're so vulnerable, and what you say can permanently alter the way that they conceptualize their worth. And I believed for a very long time that I deserved to be disabled because of people telling me that it was God's will, right? And even though I quit religion personally when I was a very young child, and I personally just didn't have any interest in it, it was still something that I believed because so many people told me to believe it, right? And as an illustration, Holy Damage doesn't communicate that well without the words explaining how that felt and why I did the composition I did, why I presented the character as a fallen angel who is still looking to God for guidance whilst they bleed out, right? It doesn't communicate it that well because the words were part of the art, whilst the words are not on the art. The text I wrote is part of the piece. And my new goal artistically is to be able to at least create the feeling of pain in the mind of a viewer. Whilst it might not be particularly visceral, I want people to at least be able to passively look at this drawing and be like, wow, I'm not a contortionist. That would hurt so bad, right? I don't need to be super graphic with my art to achieve what I want to achieve. I would like to create more graphic and kind of vulgar and gruesome art about it one day. But for now, I'm enjoying this process of creating something that feels more light and airy whilst presenting a discussion about pain and illness, right? There's something very pleasant, I suppose, about giving something so hurtful something so vibrant. I hope that makes sense. But it feels nice to have it exist visually in the opposite of how it feels. And thus, that is kind of how I got to the very simple concept. I didn't think hard about it. I probably could have gotten really deep in metaphors and the way I approached visualization, but that's how I got to somebody who is truly bending over backwards whilst their body dissolves and slips away, right? I want it to read like the very essence of who they are is slipping away from them. And what they're bending over backwards for, I don't really know. Whether it be to appease other people, whether it be to present as if they're fine and functional, if this is a result of everything kind of leaving them from the inside out. I don't know. I didn't think that hard about it. I don't think that hard about most things, actually, when it comes to art. While I think I do a pretty good job of articulating myself once I have thought about it, when I'm sitting there, I'm not thinking at all. I can't fathom you guys would ever enjoy particularly live me verbally talking whilst drawing content. I couldn't do it anyway. I've been rewatching Hellsing Ultimate every time I sit down to paint because I found that it's a great painting show for a minute now, and it's definitely not going to be legal to put on the internet. But speaking of Hellsing Ultimate, little side topic, Drawtober moment here. I'm working on drawing female Alucard, or a genderbent Alucard. Not what I'm pretty sure is Mina, like Alucard in Mina's body, or presenting as Mina. Like if just base Alucard design was feminine, and I'm having a really good time with it, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you guys. I don't know if I'm going to record the whole rendering process. I might just post it as a community tab, so if you guys want to watch me draw and like illustrate female Alucard, like ink them and get all the rendering done, be it digitally or traditional, I'm not sure. Like, I'm gonna do the line art traditionally for sure. I might render it digitally. So if you guys want to see that, let me know. Because I'm not sure. I don't really know how appealing to other people the concept of watching me render female Alucard is. But I really am liking it so far. I am struggling with components of the design, but I'm super, super stoked. They're gorgeous. I'm so happy with it already. And another thing about Drawtober that I'm planning on doing, we'll see how effectively it works. I have this small print making paper pad, and I'm thinking about cutting the sheets in half and doing a little ink illustration related to each prompt every couple of days. So I was talking about how I'm not entirely sure if I want to draw Alucard, Asterion, or an original vampire character. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Alucard for a fully rendered illustration, and then do a little like simple tattoo kind of style drawing of Asterion and a like self-created vampire, right? That way I'm still drawing Alucard, and when I say like tattoo style, that's not the right word, but just like a kind of simpler ink drawing without a lot of color, so that like it would look good as a tattoo. But I don't know, of course there's hyper realistic tattoos, but like kind of just your classic line art. Maybe some stippling. I wish I had a stippling pen. I really wish I did. I could definitely create some fun stuff. But yeah, that way I'm still drawing some stuff. I'm getting the inks out. And that way I have some excuses to draw Asterion busts or like head up pieces. So I don't know. I'm excited for it. And I can also put those in videos if you're interested in seeing them. So let me know if you want to see that component of the Drawtober stuff. Otherwise, I'll probably make all 4 videos of October somewhat Drawtober related, but I can include other things and make it less of a focus if that's what's most interesting to you guys. So be sure to let me know. I'm very flexible per usual. Well, I'm not flexible. Like, I could never do a backbend. But like, in terms of what I create, I'm super flexible because frankly, I'm here because I love to be here and I love to create. So, yeah, it doesn't really matter what I put up because I'm creating anyway. So, let me know. It doesn't bother me anyway. So, speaking of me not caring about the quality of my work because being creative is being creative, I was encountering this very, very interesting discussion the other day about how to approach drawing every day quote unquote, in a way that is beneficial for your mental health or not necessarily as constrictive as like drawing every day is actually supposed to be. So I encountered this very interesting philosophy about, rather than setting out to draw every day, where you intentionally sit down and you tell yourself you're going to perform the action, you're going to force yourself to draw every day. Rather, you put scrap paper and you put printer paper in areas where you know that you feel inclined to sit for a while, and you do things like watch TV or eat your meals and things like that. And you leave that paper where you are likely to encounter creative inspiration, and you try and encourage yourself to draw the people you're watching on TV, draw things from the show, draw things from the room, just sketch it out, and kind of just passively try to encourage yourself to start thinking about the world around you a little bit more creatively than you usually would. Draw the food you're eating and things like that. And so I'm very interested in kind of trying out this idea. While I know a lot of people are really concerned about not having aesthetic sketchbooks, I'm clearly not somebody who holds that same kind of anxiety. I perceive my sketchbooks as a place to be messy, chaotic, destructive, experiment, try things that are just not necessarily the most artistic. Sometimes my sketchbook spreads end up more like collaged journal entries. I have this really kooky page, a few pages before this, where I'm just playing around with the translucency of clear sticky notes and tissue paper to see what will make a good looking ghost character the easiest. And kind of trying to bring in that kind of mixed media component. It is an ugly page. It's gross. I ended up collaging a bunch of little portraits of paintings on it to try and make it look less stupid, but it's a messy page. It's just not great. So, I'm not somebody who holds that kind of mentality. But I also like to sketch on scrap paper from time to time because it feels a little bit more, less professional, I guess. Like, I'm not a professional artist. I'm an art student, but I'm not ever planning to be a professional artist. Well, I would love to sell products one day and sell prints of my art just because, I love to hold my own art. I want people to love to hold my art. I have a lot of prints of other artists on my wall. It's something that I like to do. I have a Redbubble for if anybody is ever interested in doing that. But it's not something I promote or go out of my way to put a lot of effort into because I want to be an art teacher. And I want to teach people how to think creatively and bring art into their life even if they never plan to be an artist, right? Because being a scientist and an artist, I personally find that having the balance between creativity and critical thinking and kind of a scientific mindset is very good for being a little bit more well-rounded if you have the ability to allow yourself to do that. And I find that the arts are really, really valuable in science. Being able to draw what you're seeing, being able to draw what you're thinking, and your theories and conceptualize things that way is really helpful for me when it comes to the scientific process and learning. So it's just kind of a philosophy I have. And there's something that just feels so non-committal and less professional and more rugged about scrap paper around your house and filling those up and doing little warm-ups and scribbling and just being a little bit childish in a place where it's so easy to throw it away if you really, really want to. Well, the only thing that I really throw away artistically is my prep paper. I try to loosen up my fingers and my wrist a little bit before I draw because I have a lot of hand pain by drawing loose circles and straight lines on paper to try and get in the flow of things and get comfortable holding a pen again for the day. I basically have to reteach myself how I want to hold a pen every morning because sometimes the way I was holding it the day before hurts, and I need to kind of stretch and kind of get used to using my fingers. They're very stiff, and they're kind of just cold and achy extensions of my palm, I guess. So I do those, and sometimes I just put them in the fireplace because they're just circles on a piece of paper for me. But when it comes to gesture drawings, I save all of those. I glue them in my sketchbook, I keep them in folders, I keep them in a binder in my room, things like that. I try to keep them because they're gestures, and they're a sign of progress, right? Even though the gesture might look bad, maybe today's gestures are 10,000 times worse than the gestures from even last year, but I still took the time out of my day to try and think about gestures and think about the human body, and that's something that I find very valuable. And I think that if I were to approach this new idea, this concept of drawing every day by putting things in a place where you might be creative, I might be able to convince myself to get better at practicing how to draw things in the environment around me. I used to do that a lot when I was a beginner. I'd see something and I'd be like, wow, how do you draw this glass canister of lemon balm? How do you draw a pair of headphones? And you could see that in my old tiny sketchbooks that I would take to community college while I was in high school. So I was in high school, but I went to community college classes. And you could see that I drew a lot of things that I'd see in the library and things like that because I wanted to learn, and I hadn't found my groove yet. I hadn't totally figured out my passion for character illustration and stuff like that. So I want to get back into that. Drawing just the mundane of the environment around me, I think, can be a really fun way of pushing myself to improve without even really realizing it, because it'll be there. And I am kind of the type of person who just picks up a pen for the sake of it and starts scribbling and doodling and just doing stupid stuff with it. So, I'm very interested in seeing how this goes, and it's something I want to document and, work on doing more. So, I'm hoping to be able to commit to a full 30 days of trying to do that, and then see what comes out of it, save those papers, and be able to discuss that at some point someday, if you guys are interested in that either. I'm also interested in doing a before and after of drawing for 30 days straight, not 24 hours obviously, when I go on a holiday being the December break. I'm not going anywhere, I don't leave my house, but in December. And I think if I can do these kind of in the same realm as each other, I could really document if I do see an improvement or not, and that's something I'm really excited about. I really, really want to try and figure out the best way to improve artistically. Not because I'm going to draw every day for the rest of my life. I definitely can't commit to that. And by that I mean if I tell myself I'm going to do it, I'm going to obsess and get upset when I don't succeed because I'm busy or something. But I'm really interested because, for me, becoming better at art was just the process of loving art and doing art. And I never actually applied very specific learning techniques until I got to college and I started taking art classes. And even then, my art improvement process was out of spite for what I felt like I should have learned in class, but I didn't, right? So, okay, this is a class about illustration. And it's okay, well, I'm going to learn how to illustrate. And then it's just draw 3 drawings was my homework for my illustration class. Just do 3 drawings over the course of the semester, and I critique those drawings. So it's I want to be challenged to push a bit more than just draw 3 drawings. And I want to be pushed to move beyond what I think artistically. And so I worked on learning how to do better illustrations the summer after that course because I didn't feel like I actually learned that much. I learned how to improve the drawings that I had done, but I didn't learn how to think like an illustrator. And that was something that's always bothered me about college classes, is not learning how to think the way I feel like I'm supposed to learn to think to be a better artist. And so I really want to practice that and see what I can do to truly actually start bringing improvement into my art and making it a part of the way I think about art. Because for now I draw because I love to draw and I love the ideas I get, but I really want to push myself to improve and actually think about art as something that I'm learning to get better at, so that I know that I'm never going to truly become stagnant. Because as long as I'm telling myself that I'm going to continue to learn and continue to improve, I know that when I am in a rut, an artistic block, I can tell myself that this is just a part of the learning process and I need to keep working towards it. Wow, I'm stuttering so much today. And that's something I really want to get better at. And so I guess this is a philosophical explanation as to why I'm interested in finding the best way to approach learning to improve, but I don't actually know how much it really matters at the end of the day. So anyway, if you're interested in pursuing that concept, let me know. We can do it together. We can create a buddy system or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll post about it on Kara, or Kara, and like hold myself accountable there. I don't know. We'll see. Returning back to the actual concept and where I'm kind of like coming from and trying to go with this drawing, I very much started to find around this point that I wasn't really certain how to define the face and the body in a way that matched what I'm trying to achieve. This is about the point where I was starting to think about adding like a chest or something, and body parts that could be a bit more indicative of a particular gender identity, or biological sex. And I decided, after a little bit more thinking, that I wanted to leave those areas obscured, and not do that. But I had originally been intending to put it peeking out from beyond that hand. It's a pretty tiny hand. I didn't want it to be kind of a focal point or anything. But I was also considering creating more defining components of the genital region to try and express if this character is biologically a man or a woman. And I decided in the end that I know what I want them to present as, but I'm not going to actually change anything. And if that creates ambiguity, that is excellent. If it doesn't, Fizzgig will continue to cough. Intermission over. If you heard Fizzgig coughing, she's fine. She's going to the vet again to get her like throat and everything checked out on the 27th. So next Friday, my child will be back at the vet to see what's up with her asthma. So she's fine. But as I was trying to say is, basically, I know what I want them to be. I know I want them to be biologically a female, and I want them to have a female gender identity. However, equally, at the same time, if I can have an ambiguity to it, which I don't really know if I pulled off particularly well, I think that can also help to kind of explain some components of a chronic illness. When it came to trying to conceptualize my perception of the body and the self, I don't feel much of anything about my body, because I don't really feel like my body is performing the way that it's supposed to. My body exists exclusively for me as a vessel for existence, right? I don't hold any positive feelings or affection for my own body, because my body simply exists, and well, it hurts, but it simply exists, right? My body isn't something that I enjoy having. It's not something that I care about, and oftentimes I don't feel like I really exist as anything. Like, it's hard to think of myself as a woman or a female, because I don't really feel human sometimes, because my pain is so dissociating from who I am. And oftentimes I don't feel like I can indulge or engage in the things that I associate with how I would like to be feminine if I felt better, if that makes sense. And so I want to explore that kind of mental component as well one day. And I'm not entirely sure how I want to do it, because I don't exist as, I'm not non-binary. I'm not I know that I am female, and I want to be a female, and I know that I'm a woman, and I'm a biological woman. I know that, but I don't feel like it. I don't feel anything about it. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel, or what feeling like a woman is supposed to feel like. I just know that biologically I'm one, and that I want to be one. And I don't feel any desire to be anything else, or a need to be anything else, but I don't feel anything. I know I said the same thing like 5 times, but I don't know how to articulate it. I simply don't feel human sometimes. And like, it's hard to feel human when you are in a pain that makes it hard to be in your own head. And I tried to do yoga or like mindful meditation once with my college. It was a extracurricular we did over Zoom in 2020 to reconnect with ourselves. And the first time I truly realized that I hate being inside of my body was when I was in mindful meditation, and we got to the part where we needed to meditate, and we needed to go within ourselves, and we needed to try and connect with our body. Because when I'm consciously in my body, the pain is so much worse, right? When I try to pretend and I exist in this defensive state where I am not myself, where I am not actively thinking about experiencing my body, the pain, while still there, isn't as intense because it's not something that I'm focusing on. And so, being within myself, I guess you could say, trying to like go through every body part and feel the connection to my brain. I don't really understand meditation because meditation is so physically uncomfortable, because I'm forcing myself to become aware of myself, I guess. When doing that process, I realized that when I am just existing and I'm not consciously thinking about existing, I'm trying as hard as possible subconsciously to be as not present as possible. And so I want to find a way to articulate the kind of nebulous feeling that kind of comes with that, where I'm aware that I am in my body and that I am controlling my body, and I'm aware that I have it, it looks a certain way, and it feels a certain way, but mentally I'm trying to not be here, right? And it's like, it's not a dark or depressing thing, and I feel like it should be. I feel like it's supposed to be this complicated mental state, but it simply feels like existing in the best possible way for me. And it doesn't feel like escapism, but I suppose it is. And this is something that is so natural to my state of existence, but sounds so absurd and abnormal when I say it out loud, that I want to find a way to illustrate it and present this information without it seeming concerning, right? It's something I'm so interested in exploring now that I am becoming consciously aware of it. I did the mindful meditation 4 or so years ago now, but I haven't actually thought about trying to articulate this mindset and this experience and this just passive component of my life until now. And I'm confident that I'm not the only person with body pain that does this, whether they realize it or not, you know? And I want to try and communicate this to people who don't do it. I want to try and communicate how it totally feels so normal to me, and it feels like the most beneficial way to approach living, right? And I don't know, it just sounds so wild and out of pocket when I say it out loud, but it's so second nature and it feels so normal to me, right? And like, it's weird to have that connection where I'm aware what I'm saying sounds wrong, but it feels right, and that is completely the barrier between what I know I'm supposed to think is normal for mental health and existing within the body for general society and what I do as somebody who is functioning in a body that is not quite performing the way it's supposed to, because I have basically dysfunctional neuron synapses and is causing an excessive reaction to pain and falsifying pain and creating pain where I otherwise shouldn't be feeling it. It's a very overactive kind of pain reception thing. Anyway, but it's just really interesting. And when I try and envision it, I picture just myself. And just doing a self-portrait isn't the correct way to approach actually communicating this. And so it's something that I'm really, really looking forward to exploring somehow. And I think it's going to take me probably maybe even a year or two to actually properly communicate it. But I'm going to be working on creating the skill set I need to actually convey the piece how I want to. Because I'm thinking some sort of puppet on strings approach, but the puppeteer clearly doesn't care and doesn't seem to mind. I'm something about controlling a body whilst being aloof to that type of control that you have. Seems very right. And I can think of ways to do it verbally, narratively. I can think of ways to communicate it in writing. But how do I bring that into a visual thing that people can see and do not need to read? That's something that I've been finding very interesting artistically recently. And I'm trying to work on getting better at as like a personal skill. Because when I envision something in my mind, sometimes that vision is three-dimensional and not something that can be just properly placed on a piece of paper, right? And yeah, it's been such an interesting kind of experience, kind of exploring these concepts a little bit more in depth mentally the last week or two. And I'm looking forward to kind of bringing them to life somehow. And I'm going to try and incorporate a couple of them into Drawtober in relation to some of the prompts about monsters and zombies. I want to kind of bring chronic illness into it, because it feels so ripe this year. Like last year, it really wasn't a convenient kind of connection. I really, really liked last year's prompt. It was so cool. Prompt list. But this year it feels a little bit more effective for creating those kind of metaphors and visual illustrations, and I'm really torn between fan art and original characters and trying to create something that has kind of a deeper meaning to it. And, sometimes I wonder if people even care about deeper meanings in art when they're, like, actually looking at something. Like, when you look at a piece of art, do you actually try and think harder about it? Or do you simply take it at face value and enjoy it as a piece of illustration made by someone's hand? Do you continue to try and think further about what you're seeing and create meaning? Do we do that subconsciously? That's a rhetorical question. Do we do it subconsciously? I genuinely do not know the answer to it. Generally, I try and create meaning just as much as I try to enjoy something solely for its visual appeal. I try to do both. But I also took a lot of art history classes in my undergraduate, and I did it because I simply liked doing it. And, equally at the same time, I feel like there's a lot to art history that I disagree with, which is the sentiment that every piece of work has to have a deeper meaning. I sometimes just want to draw people who are really pretty, right? There is no deeper meaning to me choosing to draw Genderbent Alucard other than the fact that I want to see it, and I know it's going to be hot, and I know it's going to be pretty, and I love her. I haven't made her completely yet, but I know that I'm going to love her, and even if it's my worst drawing, I'm going to love her for the concept of it. And that's it. There's no deeper meaning other than the fact that I want to see female Alucard with a medium to large chest, wearing like holster straps with like guns, and, like, a vest and the big red coat with guns. Like, I just want to see it. Like, there's nothing else there. I just want it. The same way a lot of people who just draw pretty girls probably don't think beyond just wanting to draw a pretty girl, and for people to want to draw pretty boys, right? And so, I don't know. I think I'm just rambling about something that I don't even conceptually completely understand at this point. So surely I've lost everybody at this point. Like, surely nobody is still sitting here actually listening to me anymore. And, you know, that's okay, because I think that to an extent I benefit from just spewing nonsense and trying to gather my thoughts and my understanding of things verbally, and having a place where I can look back on it is very beneficial to me. So if nobody else is still here listening to me ramble like a madman about stuff that doesn't matter, at least I'll probably benefit from this later one day. But finally, summarizing the piece, I'm hoping that when you look at this, you can gather something about losing your inner self and feeling like you lack control physically over the bits of yourself that you're losing. I hope you can, well, I hope no one has to ever feel pain. And I would like for us all to be able to live without chronic pain or any pain, and to be able to just feel safe in our own body. I hope that I was able to create an illustration today, while just a sketch with me, while not a finished piece that I thought hard about. I hope I was able to create some sort of allusion to the idea of not having control of oneself and not being able to combat those feelings and reacquire the self. I hope that I was able to make you feel something, at least to an extent, or empathize to an extent with some of the things that I was talking about, even if it's something you've never experienced before, and to which I hope that none of you ever do experience if you haven't experienced it. I wouldn't wish chronic pain or a chronic illness or a disability on anyone, simply because living in a world where we're not able to communicate ourselves as well as other people and be able to be understood is difficult. Like, seriously, whilst I am perfectly content having a condition, and I can't imagine my life any other way, I don't wish for anybody else to ever experience situations where they feel as if they are incapable of acquiring the help they want, communicating to their loved ones how they feel, being able to communicate pain, being able to communicate anything about life, really. Being able to articulate yourself when you are feeling something that is invisible to everybody else is very difficult. So, I wish the best to anybody who does also have a chronic illness out there, and I hope that I created catharsis within this for you. Even if it's definitely not my most in-depth and thoughtful work that I've ever created, and I definitely have better pieces about disability in my repertoire somewhere. I think acceptance is probably my best piece about accepting chronic illness, but this is all an aside and long-winded way of saying thank you so much for sitting all the way to the end of this video, being here with me, listening to me talk about Drawtober, chronic illness, drawing every day, dissolving bodies, weird gender issues, the conceptualization of the self, all of that nonsense. And if you drew along with me today, and I didn't make you upset and run away, I would love to see it or hear about it in the comments down below. Of course, I love having a community of people who share, and a community of other artists and people who get creative. Whether you did or didn't draw anything, I'm really appreciative of you being here. With that being said, long-winded outro aside, if you want to see more of my content, you want to see my happier content, my original characters, my fan art, Drawtober, more rants, college stuff, cats, subscribe to my channel. I talk about a lot of stuff. I'm a rambler, and I like to do draw with me's where we just connect and talk. So feel free to tag along. Like the video if you like it, dislike if you dislike, share if you think anybody else wants to listen to me ramble. And I suppose that's it, right? So with all of that being said, my mouth soon to be closed, I will see you in my next video, Saturdays at 9 a.m. PST, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you are, and with everything being said, bye-bye!